Hey, what's up, Unbroken Nation? I would love for you to talk about how you navigate the traumatic, the trauma of what that is, because one of the things I think is really fascinating, I've been sitting on recently, is this idea that trauma isn't necessarily just the stuff from 25 years ago, right? It's the stuff that happens today because it carries with it and it has weight. And I know right now that there are people listening who they have gone through this experience. And with your expertise, what I'd love to know is like, how do parents navigate the trauma of these experiences and raising children and the whole thing?
It's not easy. We are all struggling to be good parents, and most working parents want to do a good job. I think where we fail most often is taking care of ourselves. I think that we've all been raised to work, to produce, to perform. And parenting is not like that. Parenting is more being present, listening, asking questions. I had to learn to settle down when I was around my kids. I had to learn to turn off that high stress, intensive care mind and enjoy bath time and reading books before bedtime. I had to quit thinking about the research paper that I was behind on and enjoy dinner time and talking about their day at school. So I think the simplest answer to your question is we try to do more work than is possible, and we don't allow ourselves free time to be parents. Now, having said that, every now and then our kids are going to act up and we're going to respond to that. And whether we're tired or whether we're hungry or whether we're stressed and fatigued, we're going to react in ways that we regret. And we are, as parents, are going to have to say, oh, wow, that is not what I wanted to do. I had to learn to do that. When I yelled at my kids, I always yelled when I was post call, after a long night on call. I would come home. My husband was usually headed out the door to go work a Saturday or Sunday. And I was so tired and I had a short temper. And when I yelled at my kids, I instantly felt bad. I instantly knew that it was the wrong thing to do, even though that's how I was raised. And I would get myself together and I would tell my children that I was upset and I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it again, and please forgive me. And depending on the age of the child, I would explain why that had happened. I also learned to help my children identify their emotions. I was really good at saying, you look angry. Can you tell me you're feeling angry? You're mad about something. Can you tell me that? My little granddaughter the other day was pouting, and I said, Catherine, you look like you're pouting. Does that mean you aren't getting your way? And she shook her head, yes. And I said, what does it mean when you're pouting? And she said, I know I get in trouble at school for pouting. I know it means I'm supposed to take turns. So that kind of thing, where you talk with your child about their feelings, where you say, you look frustrated, you look disappointed, let's talk about it. That requires parents to be present, not on their phones, not on their computers. They really have to be on the level with their kids, face to face, and talking about feelings, asking questions, and listening. And I think it took me a long time to learn that. I think it probably took me 10 years to figure that out. My husband was a much better listener than I was. He didn't always want to jump in and do something and fix it. That was my way of doing things. He would say, okay, what's going on? Okay, let's think about it. What do you think? And what are we going to do? And he would talk about it, and the kids would open up. And so I learned by watching him be more laid back, more flexible, that really what they needed was to be attended to, listened to, stood by. Attending really means being there for. And so attending physicians are there at the bedside for their patients, and parents attend to their children in the same way.
One of the
It's
things
not
I'm
easy.
curious about, Susan, is, and I apologize, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to come back to this before we lost it, because I think it's really important. One of the things that you mentioned was yelling and talking about that is how you were raised. And I know that right now there is such a beautiful movement to end generational trauma by breaking that cycle. And I know that there are people listening right now who they will still tend to move towards the behaviors that they grew up with. And they're trying to figure it out. They're trying to navigate it. They're trying to end that. Do you have any thoughts about how you reconcile that moment with yourself to give yourself compassion or grace or forgiveness, but also to end the continuation of it? I think this is a really important topic that is
Yes,
happening right now, and we're seeing it all the time.
yes, it is important. And I'm glad you brought it up. Yelling is bad enough. And I grew up in a household with a rageaholic father, and I got hit a lot. And I swore that I was not going to hit my children. When my son was 18 months old, I came home from a difficult call shift, and I think we had lost a baby, and I was exhausted, and my husband had to leave to go to work, and I just got home, and my little toddler was playing, and I was waiting for him to take a nap, and he wouldn't go to sleep, and I was just so exhausted and so grouchy, and um, I was forcing him to take a nap, and he wasn't ready, and I pushed him down on the bed, and I started spanking his little thighs, and I went outside my body, I went outside myself, and I stopped. And I went, oh my God, I am hitting my son. I love this kid. I love this little boy. What am I doing? I burst into tears. I grabbed him and held him and said, I'm not going to let this happen to my family. I cannot let this happen. This is what happened to me. I'm not doing this. The next day, or I think it was Monday, that was a Saturday, I called and got an appointment with a child psychologist. I told her the story and I began therapy. And we talked about my childhood of physical and emotional abuse. And I learned how to not listen to those tapes. I learned how to not hit. I would put myself in timeout if I had to. I would go to another room and settle down if I had to. I had a hard time with yelling. I did not perfect not yelling at my children, but I did not hit my children. And and I remember talking to a psychiatrist later on in my adult life about my efforts to get rid of child abuse from my family. And he said, you got rid of the physical abuse, and maybe the next generation will get rid of the yelling. I said, really? Is it that hard? He said, sometimes it takes more than one generation to get rid of the habits of child abuse. But I felt over the years like I had grown to forgive myself because I had an abnormal childhood, to allow myself a little bit of grace. Okay, you got beat up when you were a kid. It's a lot to not want to hit your kids. And every now and then, if you snap and yell at them, you're not a bad mother. You just snapped and yelled at your kids. So I learned to forgive myself. I had psychotherapy to help me. I think this is a very difficult thing to do. I'm not sure that the average person who has been abused, who's raising kids, can do it all on their own. I highly recommend psychotherapy for people who have been abused as children and then they become parents. They will inevitably have a trigger from some childhood developmental moment in their children that will remind them of things that were done to them when they were kids. We know that happens. And so having a therapist help you walk through these experiences is very important. It helped me a lot. And I learned to forgive myself. I learned to tell them, Mommy has a problem with yelling. I'm sorry. I lost my temper and please forgive me. And they all got it. Over the years, they knew that I was temperamental and impulsive. And if I was tired, they needed to leave me alone until I had a nap. So the whole family can help break the cycle of child abuse, whether it's yelling or hitting or emotional neglect or emotional abuse. The whole family can help. Now, I had to involve my husband too. He had to know what had happened to me and why I was struggling so much to make a change. He needed to understand that. He could give me a look, and that look meant go in another room and settle down. And so I learned that he was my ally. He helped me recognize when I was overdone, when I was too stressed or too tired or needed to hand off the problem to him. So what I'm saying is that it's a difficult process to do. Most of us can't do it alone. Most of us need some sort of professional therapy, and for sure, our spouses and partners need to understand what we've been through and what we're trying to accomplish. I think parents need to expect that their children are going to trigger them in ways that take them back to childhood experiences.